Imagine waking up one morning to a world where the already fierce global tech rivalry has just taken a dramatic turn. This time, it is not just about microchips or tariffs, but a high-stakes game of economic chess that plays out under the shadows of advanced fighter jets, somber political speeches, and entire economies on alert. The latest move: China's imposition of new export restrictions targeting major Taiwanese companies. But what does this really mean for Taiwan, China, and the rest of the world? Are we witnessing the first moves in an era of economic warfare that could reshape the global order? Or is this just another round of saber-rattling in a long, tense standoff? To unravel the true implications of these sanctions, we must first step back and appreciate the deep, tangled history between China and Taiwan. The roots of this conflict stretch back more than 7 decades, back to the aftermath of the Chinese Civil War in the late 1940s, when the nationalist government, known as the Kuomintang, suffered defeat at the hands of the Communist Party led by Mao Zedong. They retreated to the island of Taiwan, establishing their own government. Since then, the People's Republic of China has never relinquished its claim over Taiwan, branding it a renegade province and insisting on the so-called One China principle. Taiwan, for its part, has transformed itself into a vibrant democracy and an economic powerhouse, steadfastly maintaining its own government, its own military, and most critically, its own independent identity, refusing to bend to Beijing's mounting pressure. For decades, relations across the Taiwan Strait have swung between cautious engagement and open hostility. The United States has played a unique and often ambiguous role, following a policy of strategic ambiguity. This means the U.S. provides Taiwan with arms for self-defense and maintains unofficial relations, but stops short of granting a formal security guarantee. It is a delicate balancing act, intended to deter China from using force, while at the same time discouraging Taiwan from making a formal declaration of independence. Despite the persistent political mistrust, cross-strait trade has boomed, weaving together the economies of China and Taiwan, even as their governments drift further apart in ideology and ambition. Yet this uneasy coexistence has begun to unravel, especially in recent years. Security concerns have come to the forefront. The technology race, involving everything from semiconductors to artificial intelligence, has intensified. New alliances are forming across the globe, and both China and Taiwan are scrambling to reduce their reliance on each other in sectors deemed critical to national security. This is particularly true for industries producing so-called dual-use goods, technologies that can serve both civilian and military purposes. It is against this backdrop that, in July of the year 2025, China's Ministry of Commerce announced sweeping export restrictions against 8 major Taiwanese companies. These are not small players. They include giants in aerospace, shipbuilding, and cutting-edge technology, such as Aerospace Industrial Development Corporation, Geosat Aerospace and Technology, the National Chongshan Institute of Science and Technology, JC Tech, CSBC Corporation, Zhongxian Shipbuilding Group, Lungte Shipbuilding, and GWS Technologies. Under the new rules, these companies are now blacklisted from receiving Chinese exports of dual-use items, products that could potentially be used in military applications as well as civilian ones. Beijing insists that these measures are a necessary response to what it calls Taiwan's separatist activities and its increased military exercises. Activities which China sees as provocative and as inching closer to formal independence. Chen Binhua, spokesperson for China's Taiwan Affairs Office, described this move as a solemn warning against separatism, signaling both to Taiwan's leaders and to the Chinese public that Beijing is prepared to escalate its tactics. But do these sanctions actually threaten Taiwan's economic lifelines? Or are they mainly intended as psychological weapons in a broader campaign of intimidation? On initial inspection, the material impact of these sanctions appears limited. Many experts, including Wu Siqi, a consultant at Taiwan think tank, argue that the move is more superficial than substantive. The reason? Over the past decade, Taiwan's defense and high-tech industries have quietly but steadily diversified their supply chains away from China. Companies like AIDC, CSBC, and Lungte Shipbuilding have all minimized their exposure to Chinese suppliers, forging stronger relationships with partners in Europe, the United States, Japan, and elsewhere in Asia. Executives from these firms have downplayed the potential for disruption, emphasizing that their defense-related business does not rely on imports from China, and that any Chinese-sourced components used in commercial operations are, in their words, highly replaceable. Take CSBC Corporation, for example, which builds submarines and vessels for Taiwan's Coast Guard. The company has confirmed that its critical defense projects source components mainly from Europe and the United States, while commercial vessels often rely on Japanese and South Korean suppliers. The share of CSBC's supply chain linked to China, according to their public statement, is extremely small. Similarly, Lungte Shipbuilding has declared that the Chinese-sourced parts used for its commercial shipbuilding business are not only limited, but can be substituted quickly if required. This is not by accident. For years, Taiwan's government has encouraged its strategic industries to prioritize defense autonomy and resilience. This has been a direct response to both the increasing risk of economic coercion from Beijing and the broader trend of global supply chains being weaponized in geopolitical disputes. Taiwan's Democratic Progressive Party government, in particular, has made defense resilience a cornerstone of its policy platform, moving to insulate its critical industries from Chinese pressure wherever possible. Yet beneath this outward calm, a deeper, more complex struggle plays out. Taiwan's government has strongly condemned China's actions, branding them as a clear case of economic coercion and a violation of international trade norms. Premier Chen Chien-jen has gone so far as to threaten legal action through the World Trade Organization, underscoring the seriousness with which Taipei views these moves. The Mainland Affairs Council, Taiwan's top body for cross-strait relations, has accused China of using trade as a political weapon to interfere with Taiwan's internal affairs and sway public opinion ahead of future elections. The United States, too, has weighed in, with the State Department labeling China's export controls as unhelpful and escalatory. This is not just rhetoric. The U.S. has its own ongoing export restrictions targeting China, particularly in the realm of advanced semiconductors and artificial intelligence chips. American policymakers view the Taiwan Strait as a flashpoint that could have far-reaching consequences for the global economy and security landscape. Meanwhile, Taipei is not standing idly by. Taiwan's Ministry of Economic Affairs is working rapidly to provide assistance to the affected companies, helping them further diversify their supplier networks and cut any remaining ties to Chinese imports. This is part of a broader strategy that has seen Taiwan invest heavily in domestic innovation, research, and workforce development. Just a month before China's latest sanctions, Taiwan itself imposed export controls on Chinese tech giants like Huawei and Semiconductor Manufacturing International Corporation, escalating the tit-for-tat trade restrictions that have come to define the relationship between the two sides. So, if the immediate economic effect of these sanctions appears muted, what is Beijing's real game here? Is China underplaying its hand, quietly preparing for bigger moves? Or is this primarily a show of strength designed to shape perceptions at home and abroad? And most importantly, how might this escalating standoff impact stability in East Asia and the world's tech supply chains, which are already stretched and fragile? Experts suggest that the answer is complicated and potentially unsettling. On one level, these sanctions serve as a warning shot, signaling Beijing's willingness to leverage its economic clout in pursuit of its political goals. But the deeper message may be directed just as much at China's domestic audience as at Taiwan or the international community. By demonstrating resolve in the face of what it calls separatist forces, Beijing seeks to reinforce its narrative of inevitable reunification and to deter any moves by Taiwan toward formal independence. Zooming out, the current standoff is part of a much larger trend: the weaponization of supply chains in global politics. The era when economics and politics could be neatly separated is over. Today, every trade policy and every export control carries hidden political messages, and the world's most advanced technologies, semiconductors, artificial intelligence systems, next-generation communications, are increasingly seen as levers of national power. Imagine a scenario where China decides to escalate further, expanding its trade restrictions to target Taiwanese semiconductors, advanced machinery, or even consumer electronics. Such a move could choke off key sectors of Taiwan's economy and send shockwaves through the global tech market, disrupting production lines from Silicon Valley to Berlin and Seoul. In response, Taiwan would likely redouble its efforts to diversify suppliers, deepen ties with allies like the United States, Japan, and members of the European Union, and invest in building stockpiles and redundancies. The consequences would not stop at the factory floor. The ripple effects would be felt throughout the global economy. Major multinational firms, including Apple, TSMC, Samsung, and countless others, are already scrambling to build more resilient supply chains that can withstand shocks from geopolitical tensions. This is not just about profit margins. It is about survival in an era where the next crisis could be triggered by a single government decree or a sudden shift in political winds. And then there is the military dimension. a shadow that hangs over every move in this economic chess match. It is no coincidence that China's sanctions coincided with Taiwan's Han Kuang military exercises, the island's largest annual defense drills. Some analysts see this as a deliberate signal, a way for Beijing to express displeasure with what it perceives as moves toward independence through military force, or closer alignment with the United States. The risk of military escalation is real. Over the past several years, China has dramatically increased the frequency and scale of its military exercises near Taiwan, sending warplanes and ships into air defense identification zones and across the median line of the Taiwan Strait. Each new round of economic sanctions and counter-sanctions brings with it the prospect of further military posturing, bolder rhetoric, and the risk of miscalculation. The United States and its allies are watching closely. Already, Washington has ramped up arms sales to Taiwan, with annual defense budgets on the island projected to climb steadily. In 2025, Taiwan's defense budget rose by approximately 3.5% to reach nearly $19.1 billion, with projections indicating spending could surpass $22 billion by the year 2027. These investments are not just about buying more equipment, they are about building a credible deterrent that can withstand both economic and military pressure. But history teaches us that nothing is inevitable. Sometimes, periods of heightened tension lead to unexpected negotiations, back-channel diplomacy, or subtle shifts in policy. It is possible, though by no means guaranteed, that a new leadership in Taiwan, or a recalibration of strategy in Beijing, could create an opening for dialogue and a gradual easing of tensions. Yet for now, most signs point to a prolonged, grinding contest over technology, influence, and national identity, a contest with no easy off-ramps. So what does this all mean for you? Whether you are a tech entrepreneur, an investor, a policymaker, or simply a curious global citizen. The first and most important lesson is that supply chain resilience is no longer a luxury. It is a necessity. Gone are the days when companies could afford to concentrate their production or sourcing in a single region, trusting that political stability would hold. The world's largest tech players are now actively building backup plans, investing in China Plus One strategies, and mapping out alternative supply routes to insulate themselves from the next geopolitical shock. For entrepreneurs, now is the time to scrutinize your own supply chains. Where do your most critical components come from? Can you pivot quickly if a key supplier is suddenly cut off? How exposed are you to political risk in regions like East Asia, where the next crisis could erupt with little warning? These are not hypothetical questions. They are now part of the basic toolkit for doing business in the 21st century. Investors, too, must pay heed. The days of assuming that global markets will remain open and predictable are over. Every trade dispute, every export control, and every diplomatic spat now carries the potential to disrupt entire industries. Those who can anticipate and adapt to these risks will be better positioned to weather the storms ahead. Even for everyday consumers, the implications are real. As supply chains are reshuffled and companies bear higher costs to diversify, the prices of everything from smartphones to electric vehicles could rise. Product launches may be delayed, and shortages of key electronics or components could become more common. As one analyst at Taiwan think tank put it, geopolitics is the new weather, unpredictable, sometimes stormy, but always looming in the background. But let's also look at the bigger picture. This contest is not just about Taiwan and China. It is about the future of the global order. The Taiwan Strait has become a microcosm for the broader struggle between open and closed societies, between democratic governance and authoritarian control, and between different visions of economic and technological progress. The outcome of this standoff will help shape not only the fate of a small island, but the rules that govern global trade, innovation, and security for decades to come. Looking ahead, experts see several possible scenarios. 1. China could ratchet up the pressure, imposing broader trade restrictions and investment bans targeting Taiwan's most vital sectors, such as semiconductors, telecommunications, or even finance. Such moves could upend global supply chains and force multinational firms to choose sides, accelerating the fragmentation of the world economy into competing blocs. 2. Taiwan could respond by aligning itself even more closely with the United States and its allies, seeking new trade agreements and defense partnerships. This could trigger a broader realignment in the Indo-Pacific, with countries like Japan, South Korea, Australia, and members of the European Union taking more active roles in defending the open order. 3. Domestic politics in Taiwan could shift, potentially bringing to power leaders more willing to engage in dialogue with Beijing. While this could open the door to negotiations, it would almost certainly require significant concessions, particularly on questions of sovereignty and autonomy, issues at the very heart of Taiwan's identity. There is also the wild card, the possibility of miscalculation or accident. In an environment this tense, even a minor incident, a misinterpreted military exercise, an accidental encounter at sea, or a new round of sanctions could spiral into a broader crisis. The risks are not theoretical. They are real and growing, with consequences that could reverberate around the world. Here's a little-known fact that many overlook. Even as Beijing and Taipei engage in high-profile displays of strength, most of the affected Taiwanese companies have been quietly preparing for this kind of scenario for years. They have built alternative supply networks, stockpiled critical components, and invested in research and development to reduce their dependence on any single country or supplier. In this high-stakes standoff, adaptability, not sheer size, may prove to be the ultimate advantage. So, did China's latest sanctions cross the line from symbolic gesture to genuine threat? For now, the answer is not quite. But the warning signs are flashing brighter with each new move. This is more than just a slap on the wrist. It is a calculated signal, a shot across the bow, reminding the world that the intersection of technology and geopolitics is the new frontier of international competition. The next move in this chess game could set off ripples, perhaps even tsunamis, through the global economy for years to come. If you want to stay ahead of the next shockwave in global tech and economics, there has never been a better time to stay informed and prepared. Subscribe to our channel, share your thoughts in the comments below, and hit the bell so you never miss one of our deep dives into the real forces shaping tomorrow's world. Because in today's interconnected age, understanding the geopolitical chess game behind global trade is not just for politics.